How's it going, everyone? Nick Templin here from Templin Scouting, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Ottawa Senators for our next video on the off-season predictions here. So if you hear some noise in the background, I apologize for that. My computer's working pretty hard to render the Vancouver video, which I am just currently finishing up, and I figured while I have some time, I might as well record a couple of videos in one day. So as an Ottawa local, the Senators are, of course, the team that I view the most often. I would call myself a fan, but I do find that I try to be as unbiased as possible with these with how I view the league, and so. But the reason why I mentioned this is just because I might have a little bit more analysis on the Sens than I do on any other team in the league, just because they're the team that I am the most familiar with. So, taking a look at what they're working with this next season, first of all, I want to note that the Sens were really surprising this past season in the fact that down the stretch near the end, they really proved that they could be potential contenders, at least in the North Division. It's going to be a lot tougher once they go back to the Atlantic Division. And if they can avoid the tough start to the season that they had this year, when they go into next year, don't be surprised to see them kind of competing for the last playoff spot in the East, potentially. So, with all that being said, what do we need to do here? Well, let's first kind of set up the lines the way that I'm kind of expecting them to look next season. So just for now, we'll just do this for now, just because there's a few guys that we obviously need to sign. There's a pretty obvious missing one here that we'll get to in a moment. Looking at the defense as well, there's been some nice, pleasant surprises for the Sens on the back end this past season. Artem Zub being one of them. It was very solid defensively, had a nice physical game to him, and wasn't afraid to contribute offensively if needed. So, there's a lot looking up for the Sens in the next couple of years. So, don't be surprised to see them as pretty solid contenders going forward. So, taking a look at some of the guys that Ottawa does need to re-sign, looking at the unrestricted free agents first. So, Anisimov, they've already said they're going to let him walk. There's no surprise there. Looking at Dzingel, they're probably going to let him walk as well, unless he takes a pretty cheap deal and wants to play a fourth-line role. But I think he could potentially go somewhere else and get a little bit more ice time than that, potentially. And then looking through the rest of the lineup, I don't think that any of these guys are going to be huge losses if the Sens choose to not re-sign them. I don't think Derek Stepan's coming back. I think he'd like to move back closer to his family. Matthew Pekka was a guy who I did enjoy watching in the 5 games that he did play. He played with a lot of speed, but overall not a NHL regular by any means. So moving on to the restricted free agents, that's going to be the most interesting part for this. So the Ottawa Senators, looking at this, Vitaly Abramov, he's an interesting one because he just decided to sign with a team in the KHL, so I don't imagine that he will be getting any sort of qualifying offer or anything, so he's just going to head overseas and may return to the team in the future. Mike Amadio, he was actually pretty good in the games that I saw him play, but I don't think he's going to make the NHL roster. I do think they'll sign him and play him in the AHL next season, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just focusing on the guys who are actually going to play in the NHL, so I'm just going to skip him for now. Looking at Drake Batherson, he had a great season this past year, looked really good on that top line with Tkachuk and Norris, and I expect to see kind of more of the same from him this next upcoming season. So, he's going to be looking somewhere in the range of $4 million for the next 4 seasons, I would say. Would be a pretty fair deal. Let's just make sure I got the zeros right. Nope, I need one more. There we go. So, signing him, he's going to go up there on the top line right wing. So, from there, We got Logan Brown is the next one that I'd be interested to sign. So he was hurt for most of the season. That's why he only played the one game up in the NHL. They decided to keep him in the AHL while he kind of had his rehab for his injury, which I don't actually know what it was. I think it was a lower body injury, but I could be wrong. So he's a guy that they're going to want to keep just to see what they have and potentially trade him if if things don't really work out for him, and they can sign him for nice and cheap. So it's an easy no-brainer just to kind of bring him back. Looking at Philip Gustafson, who is the goalie that I believe they should be protecting in the expansion draft over Matt Murray, because he was fantastic in the games that he played. You just give him just over $1 million because he hasn't had a ton of experience just yet. You sign him on for 2 years while he tries to earn that big contract. There you go. You get to move Anton Forsberg down to the minors potentially. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see if they did leave Matt Murray unprotected, if he would get taken. I don't think he will, because he's on a huge contract there, and he did not play very well last season. So I think if they did protect Gustafson, Matt Murray would potentially be safe from being picked. They're not going to bring back Hogberg. Victor Mete, he looked rejuvenated as an Ottawa Senator after being claimed off waivers, so we're going to give him a nice inexpensive contract here for 2 seasons. He seemed very happy to be here, and that's something that for the Senators, they don't always get players who are super excited to be in Ottawa of all places. So when you have that, you kind of have to take advantage of it. And he played with a lot of speed, showed an offensive side of his game that he hasn't really had the past couple of years. So overall, they might have gotten a steal in that waiver claim. Here's the big one. They've got to re-sign Brady Tkachuk, and they will. They absolutely will. There's no doubt about that. But the big question comes in how much he gets. So there's a lot of debate online on whether or not he's a $6 million player, $7 million player, upwards of $8 million. That's kind of getting a little extreme. I think he's kind of just over a $6 million player at the moment. And hopefully, and you could tell that he was really happy to be an Ottawa Senator this past season. He's starting to look more like a leader. He's matured a lot more this season, not taking stupid penalties as much as he was in his first couple of years. And, overall, he's kind of playing less like his brother and starting to play more like his own kind of player. He led the league in shots this past season. Not all were high percentage scoring chances, but he definitely was creating scoring chances with all the shooting that he was doing. So I think somewhere in this range is going to be what he gets, and I do believe that they're going to be able to bring him in for long term. So I think 5 years at 6.25 is a pretty solid deal for Brady Tkachuk. You've got potentially your new captain now, and for at least 5 years, and and you're not overpaying him, because you look at a lot of the teams that do pay their guys upwards of $8 million, $9 million per season. Not a lot of them have a ton of playoff success now because they can't build a team around them. And I think Brady will kind of see that. He'll know that he's not the kind of guy that's worth the $8-9 million, and he won't get it anywhere. So I think you can get him down to somewhere in that range. And then looking at the rest of the roster, so we're going to have Connor Brown playing on that second line with Tim Stützle. Connor Brown just came off a really great World Championship tournament for Canada. I'm hoping he comes back with kind of that confidence that he got over there. And then looking at the third line, he can play Nick Paul kind of there. Actually, I like Shane Pinto in that role. I think they're not going to be able to trade Dadonov, I don't think, but I do think it is something they're going to look into at the very least. Also, Chris Tierney is a guy that I'm going to look to trade right away here, just because, I think he's a solid player. I think he's a really good third-line player on most teams, but I think we have so many of those players in Ottawa that, that you kind of get a surplus with them, and you probably want to go out and find somebody who fits the role just a little bit better. Like, honestly, Parker Kelly in the one game that he played looked like a perfect fourth line player. But it's something you can also address in free agency as well, since having some of the most cap space in the entire league. So yeah, for sure, looking at a potential deal to get Chris Tierney out, and then looking at a team that could use a player like him. St. Louis Blues would definitely be a team like that. Potentially Toronto. The Jets, I think we saw this year, didn't have the greatest depth on offense. We're struggling to score against Montreal in the playoffs. Looking at the Capitals, maybe. I mean, he's a guy that can fit in anywhere, right? Because he's relatively inexpensive. He has offensive upside, but a really good penalty killer, defensive guy too. I mean, he didn't have the offensive season that he's been having the past couple of years with Ottawa, but we have seen in the past that he's capable of some really good offensive years. So, just looking at some of the potential options here, and I think the Rangers are a good option, actually. I know we've already done the Rangers, actually, no, we haven't done the Rangers yet, so that's perfect. So we can include this trade when we go and do them. And just kind of looking at who Ottawa could take in return. I do think that this will probably just be a draft pick trade, so I think it's probably just going to turn into 4th round pick. Yeah, I think if you get a 4th round pick for him, that's pretty good. Actually, I do think that they could get as much as a 3rd, though, for him. So let's go ahead and make that deal. Obviously, Ottawa's had a lot of draft picks in the past few years, so it's possible that they just use these picks to trade for somebody else. And I do have a trade in mind, actually, of something that Ottawa could potentially do. So we might actually look at that right now. So, looking at the Philadelphia Flyers, I think Ottawa has the potential to make a really big splash in this offseason. And that is to go after Flyers captain Claude Giroux, who's from Gatineau, just a little ways outside of Ottawa. I think that the Flyers are a team that's going to go through a serious retooling this offseason because they haven't been getting it done. And, I'm sure there's a lot of Flyer fans that don't want to see Claude Giroux go. He's their captain. He's been there for a very long time. I think, 12 seasons, something like that. I could be wrong. That's just a guess. But, he's been there for a lot of playoff runs and everything. But I do think that this is a point in his career when you can get, still really good value for him and kind of try and turn the whole franchise around and go in a new direction. So, how's this going to work? Well, in order for this to happen, Ottawa's going to have to give up a 1st round pick. It's a scary thing for Ottawa to do, obviously, because they're a team that, they haven't made the playoffs in the past 3 seasons. And I would say their odds of making it next year aren't very good either. But when you look at Ottawa's prospect pool and how deep it is, you can kind of afford to potentially give up another, I'm going to say definitely top 15 pick. If it ends up a top 5 pick, then, congratulations, Flyers, you really stole this trade. But the Sens are definitely trending in the right direction, and they can only kind of trend in a better direction if they make a deal like this, I think. So, on top of the 1st round pick, they're going to have to give up some pieces. Logan Brown, I think, is somebody that we could, send off in a trade like this. Other options here, just seeing who's available. So looking at the defense, I think, we could add like a Lassie Thompson to this trade. And now it's starting to look like, Ottawa's giving up quite a bit, but you got to remember that Claude Giroux, what he's capable of. And the fact that you're getting him for, he's only on one more year on his deal, but you could potentially re-sign him right away. And this could turn into, and how old is he? He's 33 at the moment. So I mean, yeah, it's a lot to give up for a 33-year-old center for sure. But Claude Giroux, he's been productive throughout his entire career. He's continuing to be productive at this point in his career. And, after the season, you could potentially get him on a cheaper contract since he's getting older. He provides a little bit more veteran leadership to a young group. But at the same time, I think he has the potential to really gel with this young group. I think that, there's definitely guys in this lineup. I think he could develop some really good chemistry with guys like Tkachuk and Batherson. I wouldn't want to necessarily break up the first line that they had last season, but, Norris, I think at his best is probably a second line center, not a first. So giving Giroux that chance to be a center until Norris is kind of ready to take over, I think it's a really good overall situation for the Senators. So I'm going to make the deal. I know there's going to be some comments saying either way who won this trade. There's going to be Philly fans who feel like Claude Giroux is worth more. There's going to be Sens fans who say, Lassie Thompson's going to be a great defenseman. Why would you give him up? Why would you risk, a potential top 5 pick next year's draft to make this trade happen? But overall, I think that, this is something that just makes the Sens better, not just now, but for the future as well. Gives them, I would say he probably has 4 good years left in him. And, if the Sens can make the playoffs 4 times with an aging Claude Giroux, then, they definitely win this trade. Absolutely. If they can make the playoffs 3 times, they win this trade, So it's definitely, it's a big deal. It's a big trade to make, and it could potentially come back to hurt them. But overall, I think, this is a smart trade to make. I think that, this makes the Sens a better team overall, and it gives them the opportunity to really compete next year, which is something that I think a lot of the players on this team are really hoping they are able to do anyways. So then looking to fill the left wing spot here, potential guys that could come up, I think Parker Kelly will probably be a regular scratch next year. Same with Josh Brown. I'm going to put him down here and actually put Bernard Docker in the right defense slot there. They'll probably kind of split games amongst the two of them. But then we just have to fill that last left wing spot, and I think we're going to have to look at free agency for that. So let's go ahead and do so. Looking here at the... we don't really need to look specifically at left wingers, but if I don't see anyone here, we'll switch it over. Looking for potential players that would be happy to play 4th line minutes. So, there's Blake Como, the breakaway specialist, if you guys know what I'm talking about there. And Michael Raffle, that's a decent option. I like Joakim Nordstrom, but I think that I might have already used him. I could be wrong. They could always bring Ryan Dzingel back for that role. They could bring in former Senators draft pick Marcus Sorensen, which would be kind of interesting. Never played a game for them, but they did draft him. Michael Bunting, he had some goals last season. I think he'll get re-signed in Arizona, but he does have some pretty good upside there. With the 10 goals in 21 games, that's pretty impressive. Matt Nieto, there's a lot of good options here. They could bring back Max McCormick. Just looking through here, so I think it'll be somebody kind of in this range, and I think I like the option of Marcus Sorensen, but then again, I think of him as more of a 3rd line player, and I'm not sure that he'd be happy with a 4th line role. But then we could look at, I think Nieto would be a good addition. So they could probably, and the thing about Ottawa too is because they have cap space, they can give some short-term contracts that are a little bit higher than market value for players. So I don't think that he's going to be in a situation where he gets offered more than $1 million in very many places. But give him $1,350,000 or $1,350,000 contract. Just to play on the 4th line for a couple of years. Overall, I think that really solidifies some depth there. And then looking at who would be the other scratch kind of in this situation? It's hard to say. A lot of the, like Sokolov, I think we'll see at some points during the year, but I think he'll play most of his time in the AHL. I think that's just kind of what's better for him. So looking through, I guess Austin Watson, because he'll probably get healthy at some point. And so he and Nieto will probably kind of be in and out of the lineup amongst each other there. So, yeah, I think you look at this Ottawa Senators team next year, if Tim Stützle really performs to the potential that we've kind of seen from him in the past, at the start of the season when he was doing really well offensively, if Norris, Colin White, those guys kind of are solid second and third line centers for the team. And Nick Paul, who was a pleasant surprise last season as well. Overall, this team could really make some noise next season. There will be questions coming from the depth, of course, like can Evgeny Dadonov become the player that he was signed to be and maybe move his way up the lineup? Connor Brown, is he really a second line forward, or would he be better as a third liner? Because he did get most of his points and goals, I think, on the penalty kill, which is kind of crazy. And Shane Pinto, is he going to be a fourth line center? Is he going to move up throughout the year? It'll be really interesting. But I think what's good to note about this team is that you kind of look at all the guys in the lineup from top to bottom, and you kind of think, yeah, they could play on the top line, they could play on the bottom line. With the exception of their star players like Tkachuk and Giroux and Batherson, who you wouldn't want on their bottom line. But I think it gives whoever is coaching the Sens next season, if it is still DJ Smith, a lot of freedom to move guys amongst the lineup and just kind of use whatever's working, because there's a lot of options there. So overall, if you like my decisions, if you like the contracts that I signed Brady Tkachuk, and who else did I have to sign? Drake Batherson too. And then if you like these trades that I had to make, let me know in the comments down below. If you like this kind of video, make sure you give it a like and subscribe for more content like this in the future.